Executive Director of the Australia-Israeli Jewish Affairs Council, Colin Rubinstein. Thanks so much for your time. First of all, what's your reaction to this report, this parliamentary report, Colin, that basically had a number of recommendations, largely in relation to process, but a few different options discussed as well for changing Section 18C and 18D. You would urge the PM not to do that?
Yeah, good morning, Karen. Yes, I think this is a very diligent report. And they've taken a wide variety of submissions, huge number, in fact. Our organisation made one too. And I think what we see is very sound recommendations and pathway forward. In essence, on 18C and D, while a number of options are provided, there are no recommendations for change. And I believe that's the correct decision, because 18C and 18D overwhelmingly have worked very successfully over the last 20 years. At the same time, as you pointed out, there have been genuine concerns and complaints about the process. Some of the critics have said, that the process is the punishment. And that's true in other areas of the law too, like defamation and elsewhere. But if we can fix it in this area to enhance the operation of the Act, I think that's a very good thing. And so there are over 20 process machinery recommendations under the Australian Human Rights Commission Act, which I think are very apt, certainly in line with the sort of recommendations that our organisation suggested, and I think would have widespread support. So, yes, the critics, I think, can take some solace and satisfaction from the fact that they've highlighted the problems of process, which have occurred, obviously, in a few cases. Queensland student case, for example, perhaps the Leak case. I think the critics, it's interesting that some of the critics have said that if these recommendations are accepted, it would actually cover a lot of their concerns about the operation of the Act. While on the other hand, I think those who advocate for the effectiveness and the merit of the legislation in providing the right balance, on the one hand, between maintaining robust freedom of speech, which we absolutely have in Australia, and the free speech warriors have exaggerated.
What do you say?
And on the other hand, maintaining,
what do you say to the
those
free
provisions
speech,
against racial harassment.
What do you say to those advocates of free speech who suggest that, and I've heard this argument made in recent days, that the feeling of offence is subjective and that legislation shouldn't be seeking to prevent that from happening, given the subjectivity of that emotion, for example? What do you say to that?
I think they completely misrepresented the reality. We have a judicial precedent here. There are many cases, and the judges have said unequivocally that it's not a subjective test. It's not a mere slight or offence or insult. It has to be a very serious situation. And that's what the case law has provided. And the four words are treated as one test. And so some have suggested codify that. But the reality is we live by the rule of law. I find it very strange that conservative ideological warriors of free speech are sort of ignoring or even demeaning the judicial precedent here. We trust our judges, and the legal precedent is absolutely clear. It only applies to very serious cases. What I think the inquiry has shown is the overwhelming effectiveness of the legislation, the support it has in mainstream Australia as an important pillar of the maintenance, as the Prime Minister said again correctly this morning, a very successful Australian multicultural democracy. Gives you rights, but absolutely has responsibilities to comply with the core values of Australian society.
Let me ask you one last question. We've only got about a minute left, but there's been a lot made of this, from a conservative side of politics, that this is about representing a big chunk of their support base, that they don't like political correctness. But as a retort to that, what do you say as an individual that represents a big chunk of the community as well? What would the reaction be if they did seek to change it?
What I would say is, what do you want to say that you can't currently say? You can defy political correctness in all its manifestations, as many people do, and myself, and the Prime Minister, who's talking very openly and correctly about Islamist terrorism without at all offending Islam or Muslims in Australia, who are the worst victims, by the way, of this Islamist terrorism. Look at the issues. Ball, don't play the man. I mean, this has been a distracting debate. I think, nonetheless, it's enhanced and improve the legislation if the Prime Minister and the government act on the recommendations of this very prudent committee, which has come down, I think, with an excellent report and provided the way ahead, which should garner consensual support across Australian society.
Dr. Colin Rubinstein, Executive Director of the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council. As always, I appreciate your time and good to see you. Thanks for that.
Thanks very much, Kieran.